I call the member for Indi.
And I'd also like to congratulate and acknowledge that lovely speech from the member for Forest. Well said. In talking to this Dairy Produce Amendment Bill, I'd like to take the opportunity to talk about the great success that is the dairy industry in my electorate of North East Victoria, and I'd also like to take the opportunity to report on some of the actions that I've been able to do in the 2.5 years as being the member for Indi. There has never been a better time to live in North East Victoria and be involved in agriculture. Our future is bright, with new trade opportunities, excellent water and rain supply readily available, access to skills and training through La Trobe and CSU universities, excellent TAFE services, great high schools in Toolangatta, Rutherglen, FCJ in Benalla and Mansfield, all offering wonderful courses to young people. Agriculture in Indi is ready for the next really big transition. Our farmers and businesses are already leading the way. In my electorate of Indi, ag is worth over $600 million per year. It's the 5th largest employer, with over 5,000 businesses across 8 local government areas. And food-based manufacturing that value adds to our produce employs over 2,200 people. And I've been very proud to represent the diversity of the agricultural businesses in my electorate for the last 2.5 years. In this time, I've been an active member of the Agriculture Standing Committee, and we've undertaken and are still doing an inquiry into what do we need to do in the future to make agriculture more innovative and help us keep that cutting edge. And I had great pleasure in taking the committee to Wodonga in North East Victoria earlier this month, and also on tours up to the dairy industry in the Kiwar and Midder Valleys. I've had the privilege of representing the chestnut industry in their efforts to get a levy for their own their industry and work with Horticulture Australia Innovation, and I'm really pleased with the success there. And then the other industries, the other small industries that I've been able to work with as Horticulture Australia does its innovation, does its organisational transfer work. I've been absolutely delighted to represent many constituents, particularly those concerned about animal welfare issues, and from animal welfare to live export to how to take their industries to take their issues to Canberra and be a strong voice for them. I've been a participant and encouraged many of my communities to be involved in the Senate inquiries that have taken place, and very pleased to be part of the process of making sure that the voices of Indi come right to Canberra. I've arranged deputations for farmers and farming businesses to come to Canberra and meet the relevant staff, departmental staff and ministers. I've supported legislation in this House right across the spectrum, but I've been particularly pleased to support the private members' legislation calling for the legalisation of the industrial hemp for human consumption. This legislation is still on the table. It's a really important issue, and I hope it gets addressed before we go to the election. I've lobbied fiercely for regional provision of higher education, particularly for agriculture, and to make sure that we have centres of excellence in the country, not just in the Big 8 in the city. I've supported continual funding for CSIRO's research, and particularly for one of my all-time favourites is the dung beetle projects. Across summer, as we were having our barbecues, many of us noticed there's been no flies this season. And one of the reasons why there's been no flies while being able to have outside eating is because of the fantastic work of the dung beetle. Now, sadly, that research has been curtailed, but it's one of those really important issues where the community comes to their local member and I can bring it to Canberra. I've been really pleased to represent and support to the Minister for Health for the continued funding for the National Centre for Farmer Health, and delighted that that centre is now up and running again. I've been a great supporter of the Murrindindi Shire and was delighted that they were able to get funding to revamp the Yea sale yards. I've represented farmer concerns, particularly concerning the constraints management strategy, part of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and the impact that this is going to have on farmers in the Upper Goulburn, bringing farmers to Canberra, getting their voices heard, lobbying with the government, and I think we've done some really good work on that one. I've been able to support local food manufacturers, particularly in their lobbying around cross-border issues related to training. I've met with many delegations and been happy to bring them to Canberra, and one of the ones I've been most proud to support was to host a deputation of women, members of Australian Women in Agriculture, as they come on their regular lobbying trip to Canberra. It's been great to see them there. That process has been going now for good on 15, close to 20 years, when right across Australia members of Australian Women in Ag come with their issues and they bring the voice of agriculture, and particularly women's voice, to this parliament. And in the electorate, it's also been a very busy time. We've established a water advisory group. We've had forums on food manufacturing. We've supported agricultural education, particularly encouraging young people to go to university, to go to TAFE to get the skills they need. We've hosted the Australian Manufacturing Farming Forum at Wodonga, together with TAFE and major industries, a terrific turnout. And I was delighted to welcome my parliamentary colleagues Bob Katter and Senator John Madigan to that event. So we've had CSIRO come talking to local farmers about their research and opportunities for much more closer collaboration between those on ground and CSIRO. But perhaps the biggest achievement of my time in this parliament has been getting the 40 NBN wireless towers and the 30 mobile phone towers, because all of us know if we don't have really good, strong, effective, reliable and affordable communication, the business of agriculture just can't proceed. So I'm really pleased that we're actually now at the cutting edge of what we need to be for the future of my area. And in that case, I'd particularly like now to address my remarks to the importance of the dairy industry. It's played a major role and is doing some absolutely fundamental work to take all of agriculture to the next century, particularly in the Kiewa and Meadow Valleys. In this House at other times I've spoken about the Alpine Valleys Dairy Partnership Project, but today I'd particularly like to talk about the work that they're doing on succession planning and acknowledge the work of Patton Bridge and the Pathways team in this regard. In 2011, ABS census data showed that over 60% of dairy farmers, owners and managers were aged over 50 years, making it one of the oldest farming cohorts in Australia. So we've got families who've been in the community for a long time, getting older, thinking, what am I going to do with my dairy farm? So as part of this Alpine Valleys Dairy Pathway project, the community undertook a study to see what was actually happening here and what did we need to do to unlock the barrier that farmers were facing, because as they got older, farming families, they would move out of dairying, perhaps they'd move into beef, and the amount of milk coming out of our valleys was decreasing. This has an impact on our production facilities, particularly at Tangambalanga, and eventually, if we don't have the milk coming, we haven't got the industry. So this research project was really important. It looked at farm succession planning, what was currently happening, what were the barriers and what did we need to do. And clearly it's a very complex process of passing farm from one generation to another, to bringing in new young players into the industry. So some of the issues that the survey showed was it's a really hard topic to get people to talk about. It's emotional, it involves money, it involves land, it involves relationships, and it involves intergenerational communication. So it's really hard to get the topic even talked about, as well as being a hard topic to address. They found that there was not much documentation. Some of the farming businesses had the plans in their head of what they were intending to do, but not necessarily putting it on paper, talking to their accountant, talking to the farm advisor, or really importantly, talking to their children. They found that while professional help is available, we have good lawyers, solicitors, accountants, mediators, it's often not used. So there's a huge opportunity to actually introduce these professional accountants to the farming community and explain how the process works. And of course, timing is critical. If you leave your farm succession planning too late, it just might be too late. So doing it while you're well, you're healthy, you've got a next generation interested and able to do it, and it takes time. You can't just do it overnight. Often it takes years to get all your ducks lined up so you can do what you need to do. So the Alpine Valleys Dairy Pathway project set about talking to people, working out what was currently happening. They designed and trialled a practical intervention, and they've now got plans to engage professionals. The conclusions they reached were that we really need to understand much better the impact that failing to do succession planning is having on agriculture, not only on the dairy industry but all of agriculture, and the blockage is causing in our ability to move on in absolutely being more innovative. That we need to improve the agricultural education system, and particularly interaction with new technology, using our mobile phones, using our internet to bring that enormous capacity to our farms so that we can really get the cost savings and the benefit we can through that new technology. But we need the education to do it. We need direct intervention with farming families, teams of people to actually go and work with families and help them through this process. The study showed that less than 25 farming businesses had a clear direction for the future, but over 73% were really interested. So I'm committed to continue to work with the dairy industry and the other agriculturalists in Indi to bring about the potential we've got for major increases in productivity and production and, importantly, profitability. So to the beef, the prime lambs, the wool, the horticulture, the wheat and grains, the oilseed, the nurseries, the flower farmers, the fishing, the turf, the grape, the wine growers, the honey, the hops, the tea, the grass seeds, the berries, the mustards, the alpacas, the horse breeders and all the other agricultural industries in Indi know that you've got a champion in with me. I know the industries, I know the circumstances and I know what we need to do to absolutely make Indi one of the most productive and profitable and wonderful places to do agriculture in the whole of Australia. So just to make a couple of comments about the legislation before the House. This proposed bill is a really interesting one for me because in my prior life I was actively involved in the dairy industry and this whole conversation about levies and how it works. And I just have a little note of warning to my colleagues in the dairy industry. Be careful what you wish for. The proposal to remove the requirement to have a dairy poll, and that's what this legislation does, we're actually taking away the requirement, and in its place, rather than having to do it every 5 years, and let me say wool does it every year, so 5 years is not a big ask, delegations and the industry has suggested that we set up a consultative committee. Now, I haven't got the details of how that consultative committee is going to be set up, but I do hope it has good gender balance as well as age balance on it. So this advisory committee is actually going to provide advice on the levy. So let's just check how that's set up, how you get elected to that or do you get nominated. And then there's a fallback position that if 15% of the Group A levy payers decide they don't like it, they can actually call on a levy poll. But the major advantage, and I just think we have to be really careful with this, the advantages we're saying is we're going to reduce red tape and we're going to make it easier and quicker. But the whole reason for having this poll and every 5 years was to have a direct connection between the people who pay the levy and the people who spend our money. And what this legislation is doing is removing that direct connection. We're putting a third party in place. And if I know anything about agriculture, I know that when you've got a direct connection, when the people who spend my money have to tell me how they're spending it, they have to come to my community, they have to justify it, they have to have the meeting, they have to argue the case, then they're much, much more considerate about how they spend my hard-earned dollars. So I say, in getting rid of this levy or changing the arrangements to the dairy industry, pay particular attention, because we in the wool industry, the beef industry, the other industries that pay horticulture, we prize our ability to have regular polls and to set our levy about how much it would be. So in closing, I am going to support the legislation because it's come from the industry and I'm a great believer in representing the industry and doing what it needs to do. But I'm saying to my constituents, keep an eye on it. And I'm very happy that if you think that the industry is not doing what it needs to do, to pay some attention to it. So, in closing, what I'd like to say to my dairy industry colleagues and to my friends in the agricultural industries, that I remain committed to work for you. I'm absolutely dedicated to being the voice of agriculture, agribusiness and manufacturing in North East Victoria. To the families, to the businesses, the students, to the educators, to the service industries, the stock and station agents, the truckers, the sale yard attendants. It's been indeed an absolute privilege to be your representative in Parliament, and I look forward to seeking your support at the coming election.
The question